Welcome everyone to the PYRESWAP show for Thursday's show. And thank you guys so much for being so consistent in this particular time slot, because it is a unique time slot. And welcome Jeff. Always great to have Jeff here. Today, Jeff, I definitely haven't, okay? Definitely haven't, yeah. Today, we can talk about a couple different stuff. You know, the CPI data came out today, and it was a little bit higher than normal. So U.S. inflation data was a little bit higher than normal. So they just did this. They just had that 50-point cut. They just had a 50-point rate cut. I'll write this down on the board, actually. Yep. CPI numbers higher than forecasted. Make sense? So the CPI numbers being higher than forecasted kind of implies that maybe inflation is not as tamed as it's meant to be, if that makes sense. Hope that makes sense. Today, by the way, is a fear day in the market. Both sides. Yeah. Fear. Fear is the theme. Fear. Would you guys feel like it? Fear? Yeah. I think CoinMarketCap ranks us in at 37, which is fear. And I believe alternative.me, but when it wants to, 39. Hope that makes sense. Yeah, Jeff, Fear and Greed Index. Fear and Greed Index is effectively it's an index that didn't come out. It actually was created by CNN Money, I think. It's actually a kind of newer, it's a newer type of index, but generally speaking, it is a sentiment analysis for the market as a whole. So you also have a Fear and Greed Index for, the Fear and Greed Index, this is investor sentiment. This is in fact from CNN. So CNN Money, this is a large media company in the United States. They came up with this Fear and Greed Index. I think I want to say this in the 90s, but yeah, bravo to my producer for the amazing screen share transition. But anyways, right now they have a Fear and Greed Index. You say, what emotion is driving the market right now? You can learn more about the index. They might even have this explanation here. What is the CNN Business Fear and Greed Index? The Fear and Greed Index is a way to gauge stock market movements and whether stocks are fairly priced. The theory is based on the logic that excessive fear tends to drive down and too much greed tends to have the opposite effect. The Fear and Greed Index is a compilation of 7 different indications that measure some aspect of stock market behavior. They're market momentum, stock price strength, stock price breadth, put and call options, junk bond demand, market volatility, and safe haven demand. Safe haven demand would be like a fear. Junk bond demand, I actually have no idea what that is. Put and call options, there's a ratio between there. And generally speaking, the put to call ratio, if it's like above 0.7, it generally means it's a fear market. Bulls are normally larger than bears, like there just tends to be more of them. And if there's ever like a deviation from like the normal, that kind of can swing this one way. Oh, Jeff. The crypto one has its own Fear and Greed Index. So a website called alternative.me, which is, again, this is like a software ranking website. They created their own Fear and Greed Index for Bitcoin. Basically this. They actually now rank more of these things. But the fact of the matter is they have their own Fear and Greed Index. Makes sense? So believe it or not, it went from being a neutral day yesterday to a fear day today. They do everything from Twitter sentiment. They don't exactly reveal how it's calculated, right? So CNN Money over here, they created a Fear and Greed Index. Yeah, as soon as new data becomes available. And yeah, this gauges the market's mood, as it were. But Jeff, I would say the reason that I cover it so much is because crypto as a market is more emotional than other markets, which is part of its volatility. Like it's since it's extremely not well understood, it is effectively driven by, I guess, what you consider mythology. Let's call it that. Mythology. Let's put it this way. I'm going to tell you a story. A long time ago, I worked for an industrial consulting company, and one of these jobs involved being an industrial consultant in a third world country because ExxonMobil was building a refinery there, right? And this is not me even on the trip, but one of the guys that worked there was a magician, right? One of the consultants at this company, he was a hobbyist magician. Does that make sense to you guys? And like, he could do card tricks and sleight of hand stuff. Does that make sense? And when he was, when they were among the locals, he would do these card tricks and these sleight of hand tricks to the people at the bar, and they freaked the fuck out and they thought he was a demon. Does that make sense? Yeah. So like, they don't have the, they're not as spoiled as us first worlders, where we have guys like David Copperfield and Chris Angel just constantly doing stuff. I was walking down the street in Austin the other day. There was a guy doing card tricks on a table in on West 6th Street. You know, so like, they just have street magicians all over the place. In this third world country, there is not this level of understanding around the way card tricks work. So therefore, when they saw them, the narrative they came up with was that this person was a demon. Does that make sense? Anyways, the situation de-escalated somehow, and basically that guy was told not to do magic tricks for the locals anymore. So anyways, we're basically recreating that in Web3, because not any, like, Web3 is filled with people that have no idea how markets work, right? So we have this kind of timeline where you created this crypto and this blockchain paradigm, right? This DLT, and then legitimately, like, right there, you have this paradigm with the blockchain side getting exposed, this blockchain side getting scaled up, right? But the fact of the matter is that the crypto market is still something that is less understood than crypto itself, right? Like, the market itself, when you're talking about the market, you're talking about the way that humans interact with it, like, as a whole. Does that make sense? Like, all of the human behavior around it, which is kind of funny because you have more data around this than other markets. So generally speaking, when you think about like the movement of these, the price movement of these things, people ascribe their narratives to why it's happening. Does that make sense? So, you know, right now, October is a month right now where the true crypto summer could start this month. Are you guys aware of this? That this is something that's forecasted? That it normally starts 170 days after the halving or something? Yeah, Jeff, you know, I have great news for you. There are guys who've been around for longer than that, and they still don't understand fuck all. Yeah. Yeah, like, again, like, Jeff, that is arguably, like, the whole reason why I am motivated to keep pushing at this, because it still blows my mind, the level of comprehension, and how low it is, But yeah, anyways, so, the reason we talk about fear and greed index for crypto is because most of the time, there's no reason to look at anything other than the human emotion. Does that make sense? It's like the reason it's so exponential. Crypto's volatility is a byproduct of its, I guess we would describe it as a speculative asymmetry. Yeah, immaturity, yes, but what I mean to say is, Fexer, I know it's tragic. Yeah, I'm sorry that we're trying to flip that script. Yeah, so it's a byproduct of its what did I just say? Yeah, volatility is a byproduct of its asymmetry, meaning its speculation density. We'll call it that, speculation density. So, do you guys remember me talking about like a utilizer to speculator ratio in the past? Yep, okay. So, believe it or not, in other markets, and I actually don't even have data right here to pull up for that, but generally speaking, let's say for the real estate market, okay, the majority of real estate is actually getting used. Does that make sense? It's not getting speculated on. You guys understand what I'm saying? Like you can use real estate for other business models, right? Like, you know, commercial real estate can be used for restaurants and shops and what have you. So like it does, even if there's like a profit motive driving it, it's not necessarily that they're buying real estate to flip it to the next guy, right? You can also rent real estate too, which kind of has that double whammy, as it were. Could I expand on that? Okay, Jeff, so when we talk about speculation density, we'll talk about the UTSR real quick. So speculation density, I'm gonna keep using that word maybe. I don't know if I like it yet, but it's better than that. Okay, utilizing the speculator ratio, we can just pull that up right here on CoinMarketCap. So right here with Ethereum's always the best one to look at right here. We have a market cap of 286 billion. We have a volume of 15 billion. Does that make sense? 24 hours. So first of all, this is the utilizer to speculator ratio in dollars. We'll just write it like that. UTSR $. Okay? And as for Ethereum, we have 24-hour volume of $15.4 billion. Okay? Now, if we go to a website like Etherscan, what we can do is we can go look at the gas tracker, right? And this is the gas tracker for the Ethereum blockchain. So, believe it or not, right now, first of all, you know, they talk about this the utilization here, they're talking about the utilization of the block itself. But what we're getting at here is if we look at the what is it? Not dashboard. I'm trying to find. They always keep changing the way this dashboard looks. If I click dashboard, is that what I'm looking for? Okay, here we go. Okay, so the total 7-day gas fees right here. Sometimes this thing doesn't pop up, but you see that the 7-day gas fees was 38.28 Ethereum, right? So let's say that we're gonna fucking let's say that there was an average. We don't know there was an average, but let's say there was an average, okay? So if we take 38.28 and divide that by 7, we end up with 546.8 Ethereum, right? So let's write that down real quick. 547 Ethereum is getting used every day, right? So that's what's getting used as gas. And we go back to here to see the fucking price point. 23.75. 23.75 times 547 equals $1.3 million. You guys see that right here? Correct, Jeff. Yes. So right now, I don't know if you guys know this, since 2022 or so, Ethereum gets burned as gas. Like 100% of it gets burned. Does that make sense to you guys? Yeah, did you guys know that? So, 24-hour volume is $15.4 billion. Yeah, this is new. Yeah, so Fexer, it didn't used to be. Did you guys know that Vitalik's original plan for Ethereum was that it was just going to always inflate, and eventually there was always going to be a certain amount of Ethereum getting lost, and he assumed that the amount getting lost would equal the amount getting inflated, and therefore he's like, therefore we'll be at elastic equilibrium. So thankfully, he didn't stick with that, and now it gets burned in gas. So Ethereum gets burned in gas, which is also useful. It's useful, right? So, by the way, this also really, really implies that Ethereum is bullish, because do you guys now know how much Ethereum gets minted per year? $800. So the fact of the matter is Ethereum right now is burning in like arguably a day over half of what is it's expanding by per year. Does that make sense? 547 ETH? Because it's only increasing by 800 per year right now. Does that make sense? So in 2 days, you're net deflationary. Do you guys understand? Arguably, it's not consistent every day, but like as of right now, we have definitely burned more Ethereum than we've printed. Does that make sense? Go. So this is right here is this volume. When we talk about the volume, this is the amount getting traded. When we talk about this number, it's not getting used. So now we take these two numbers, and Jeff, had you been here for previous classes, you would know that ratios make numbers meaningful, right? Do you guys remember that? Ratios make numbers meaningful. So if we take $1.3 million, 1,300,000, in fact, I won't use commas because I'm trying to be international, and then we divide that out of 400 million, we will end up with this fucking this figure here, which by the way, this is Fabianism. This is my fucking Web3 finance fucking stuff. Like, I don't think anybody else actually fucking calculates these ratios. Anyways, so 1.3 million out of 15.4 billion. You guys ready to do the math? Okay. 1300000 divided by 154,000 million. You guys see that? And if I divide that, you get 8.44 blah 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 this. So what you want to do is you want to inverse this, and you end up with a 11,800. You end up with a utilizer to speculator ratio of 1 to, I'm gonna write 12,000 right there. I was right 11,800. Does that make sense? This is actually very high. This is a very high ratio. Normally it's closer to like 2,000. Fexer, to be honest, I think they just changed it because of GAT, because of Sonic. Phantom used to burn 30%, then they dialed it down to 15% when they created the gas monetization program. I have no idea. I'm gonna assume it's still 15%, but I think what they did is I haven't read the Sonic docs yet. Yeah, okay, it's still 15%. There you go. So Phantom burns 15% in its and guys, that's what at least my last knowledge is. So right now, the utilizer to speculator ratio for Ethereum is 1 to 11,800. I think the last time we calculated it was maybe 6,000. It was like maybe half of this. I have calculated before during winter. I've seen it as low as 1 to 600. I have no idea, Jeff. Yeah, because I haven't read the docs yet. Yeah, I haven't read the docs. So I actually, yeah, that's what it takes from me. Yeah. Well done. Okay. So 1.3 million against 15.4 billion in dollars. What this means is for every dollar of Ethereum getting used, there is $11,800 of Ethereum just getting traded. Does that make sense? Like, it's just volume. Now, some people will argue that some Ethereum is getting used for payments, but I just really don't believe that. Does that make sense to you guys? Well, CJ, do you think that yeah, I promise you, like Pyre Gas. Yeah. I think that I think that my token still burns better than anybody else's. Yeah, but you're welcome to do whatever you want. Yeah, no payments at all. Jeff, again. All right, so in 2020, okay, over the last 4 years, there has been some what we call financial tumult, right? Would you say that there's been some issues financially, economically, like worldwide, globally? Have you guys experienced this at all? Okay, so in the United States, something interesting happened. Gasoline went in certain places to $7 a gallon. Does that make sense? And this is normally pretty high. So let's say that in Texas where I live, I've seen it as low as like $2 to like $6. Actually, it didn't even get that high. It was like $5. Does that make sense? I know you guys call it petrol over there, right? Petrol, gasoline. Okay, went from $2 to, yeah. Well, okay, the point of it is this is the utilization price, and when the prices started spiking, okay, now you know. In California, by the way, it's also $7, right? So in Texas, we can keep it under $5. I think right now the average is like $2.80, I think. $2.80. In California, I believe it's still like significantly higher than that, but again, I don't know. $6 at Costco. Okay, yeah, so ours is less than half of that, like anywhere. I'm not gonna get in on that. Yeah, I believe so. It is taxes. Yeah. Okay. Anyways, I'm not here to actually like nitpick all that stuff. But what I'm getting at is when the price started spiking initially. Seabiscuit, you might remember this from 2022. When the prices started spiking initially, there's a whole bunch of outrage, right? So there was bumper stickers, and I guess you could say political cartoon stickers that were getting slapped all over gas pumps, and they were blaming the president, they were blaming the governor, they were blaming Joe Biden a lot, right? Does that make sense? Now, granted, it got, the prices dropped in most places of the country within 6 months. But the fact of the matter is, though, Jeff, you have to understand, like, when people are, the reason that we even have these type of central banking systems is literally for this word right here. Nominal rigidity. And if you guys want to think of something easier for this idea, this is really what price stability means. So I'm going to actually pull up nominal rigidity here. Well, believe it or not, we use vibrattility. Remember that? Yeah, so this is actually the same concept. So this is known as price stickiness or wage stickiness. Is a situation in which a nominal price is resistant to change. This sense? So the fact of the matter is that this is where this resistance comes from. Where this resistance comes from is people's expectations. Does that make sense? So you can have this aggregate price level which becomes sluggish or sticky in the sense that it doesn't respond to macro and economic shocks as it would if all prices were flexible. Does that make sense? So it's a non-flexibility of pricing. So the fact of the matter is, Jeff, is that when people are transacting against things, the reason that we end up with a numer rare is because it saves people mental labor. Does that make sense? Like, one of the reasons we turned decay off in PYRESWAP is because it saves people mental labor. Does that make sense? So when people think mentally, if they're just they're deciding for the household what their budgets are, they think a certain amount of what they must spend on gas. Does that make sense? They have an idea in their head about how much gas costs, right? So generally speaking, when people are sending payments, they're still sending payments for things. Does that make sense? So they're sending payments like in the numeraire. Does that make sense? Like, there are in fact some business dealings that get paid in crypto. Sometimes, by the way, Vitalik says he uses USDC as payments more than he uses fucking Ethereum for payments, right? But he uses USDC on Ethereum. Does that make sense? That's like from Vitalik's blog. So he's using Ethereum as the gas to send USDC, but generally speaking, people want payments for, like, I guess you could say the real world assets, as it were, in stuff that has nominal rigidity, right? Which is stability. You might notice also that people are fucking pissed about inflation. Would you guys say that inflation generally is not a great thing for anybody? Like, the average person, they're fucking pissed about inflation because they don't feel like their income is going up as fast as their costs are. So it puts them under the stress. Make sense, everybody? Right? It's like a black magic fucking shaft job worldwide, right? Well, Jeff, I think that human nature, people want. Yeah, exactly. Correct, Jeff. Yeah. Correct. Because people don't like thinking of that changing. They like thinking of that as a benchmark. They like thinking of that as being trustable, resilient, regular. Does that make sense? The consistency of its value is what allows people to speculate on it. So like a stable coin, when do people dump stable coins? Yeah, stuff like that. Yeah, Jeff, everybody, because most people, Jeff, are making a certain amount that is like the same every month. Does that make sense? So they make a certain amount every month. They like to spend the same amount every month. Maybe they have a savings goal, right? Maybe they're paying off debt, right? So they have like their wage doesn't change very much every month. Therefore, like they don't like it when the money they're getting paid their wages in. Correct. And the reason that happens is because of the whole producer price index thing. So PPI changes first, and then when producers feel the pinch, they immediately have to shift their margins around to figure out how to fucking outsource their pinch, right? So first the banks pinch the producers, then the producers pinch the consumers. Does that make sense? When people say that like inflation is from corporate greed, it's like this is the last domino that's hitting them. Does that make sense? This is the last domino hitting them. But corporate greed is actually not the it's not okay. Corporate greed implies it's like dopamine seeking behavior, but they're in fact actually trying to outsource their pain. Right? The majority reason why the majority reason why this thing happened. Okay, the majority reason why arguably anything good happens in the economy is when people end up trying to be pain averse to something. So, what causes the workers' wages to go up is the employer having more competitors. Does that make sense? If the employer has more competitors, he has to provide a competitive wage. If he doesn't have competitors, he does not have to provide a competitive wage because he doesn't feel the pain of losing to competitors. Does that make sense? Pain aversion is just a much higher motivator than pleasure seeking. So it really isn't like greed, but I'm not going to dissect all that right now. That's not really relevant. But generally speaking, Jeff, when people are sending remittances, when people are sending payments, they're using fiat. They're using nominally rigid instruments. They're using numeraire money. So they're using US dollar, Great British pound, the euro, the yuan, the fucking peso, whatever you want. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Because the fact that fiat doesn't change that much in a given day is what allows people to save it. Does that make sense? So like its stability is what allows people to feel good about storing it. So when we talk about money, like what its job is, we talk about it being a store of value. So like crypto instruments do not necessarily make for a consistent store of value. The value that's being stored is always changing. Does that make sense? Correct. Yes, and arguably, Jeff, what you're talking about there is even more like a business level transaction, which is still not what the average consumer and or worker is dealing in. 60 days net. I mean, the average worker, I think in America, Jeff, they get paid twice a month, 4 times a month, or once a month. So a 60 days net, he means end of month. EOI means end of month. And then, you're completely correct that right there is an example of time value of money. Jeff, I used to work in America. There was a CBD boom around COVID, before COVID. Does that make sense? Yeah, exactly. So again, and Jeff, that's time value of money, which is the way banking works. So there was CBD. Do you guys know what CBD is? It's hemp, right? Medicinal hemp, but it's THC free. Yep, exactly. So there was this boom about CBD and how great it was. And I think when I was kind of like brought into CBD, because it wasn't really wasn't me going to get in. Amazing. I think a pound of CBD biomass was going for like $100 a pound, and when I got out, it was going for like 60 cents a pound. So the market of CBD crashed 99%. And what I'm getting at here, though, is that this type of price volatility, a lot of people were taking 60-day net, 90-day net deals for moving flour, for moving the hemp flour. It did, but there is still out of CBD. I'm not gonna get into it. Yeah, there was a crazy fucking. I don't really touch that market anymore, but I still have these weird connections anyway. But like a 60-day net deal, for those of you who don't know, it's like basically you just have deferred payment. You have deferred payment. Does that make sense? So what that means is in 60 days, you're owed the total, right? So it's like, hey, I accept this. It's kind of like credit. Yeah, it's kind of like credit. And the price changing on the flour was fucking up all this net debt, because they would be buying flour at like $200 a pound, and they're putting out a 90-day net. And then I was only in CBD for a year, right? So like the stuff that was crashing, it crashed 99% in a year. So if it was like a 90-day net deal, by the time it was actually moving, it was like, like they couldn't sell it for the price they owed back to the farmer, right? The distributors couldn't. And, you can imagine, Jeff, like using Ethereum for actual payments. Like even if it's like payment at time, right? Like cash due on delivery right now, you're still talking about something that, Ethereum right now was 2380. Like here ago, arguably it's been kind of regular. But if you look at it like over a month, maybe still kind of regular. But even here, going from 2700 to 2300 is still like a 20% change. Does that make sense? Yeah, you guys imagining? Use your imaginations. Right? So this 20% change, Jeff, if you understand like the level of outrage concerning like the price of gas changing, you can imagine like, do you get what I'm saying? Like people are still gonna lean towards using the dollar even when it's in the biggest inflation crisis in the last 50 years. Well, Jeff, the way that I look at it, I don't even think of crypto as payments. Yeah, so like the Bitcoin white paper referred to it as like peer-to-peer payments. Right? This is one of the early narratives. It's peer-to-peer payments because it doesn't have any middleman, right? Like the network itself just handles the payments. This is arguably useful. Does that make sense? This is arguably useful. And arguably you would still have peer-to-peer transactions. I think that this one makes more sense. But when I think of a payment, I mean, you know what, CJ, I don't know if you're making that up, but there's an idea there as well. When you're thinking of a payment, you're kind of thinking of it like this is an amount due. Does that make sense? Yeah, CJ, it sounds like fucking a great hashtag. You fucking turn it into it. You call it QDE. You fucking call it DQDE. Decentralized quantity. Yeah, anyways. Okay, P2P payments. Like, I'm not really, like, a fan of this idea because I don't think it's held up to scrutiny. I think calling peer-to-peer transactions makes sense. But I'll tell you this right now. Like, everybody who's listening to me right now, everybody, mind your language, sir. Okay, thank you to whoever's tuning in on Kick to tell me to mind my language. I think, me using profanity is actually I think a lot of people don't mind it. And I think that, this might not be anything I can do about it. Okay, anyways, peer-to-peer payments versus peer-to-peer transactions. If I were to ask you guys, like just the few dozen people listening to me right now, do you guys tend to use it more for like transacting or for paying? Like, do you guys actually like buy things with crypto, or you kind of like, you're trading, you're kind of speculating, you're investing, you're dabbling? Yeah, Seabiscuit, have you ever paid? Yeah. Hilarious, he did. Seabiscuit, have you ever paid for something with crypto? Yeah, Jeff. Cacti. You have bought cacti with crypto. Like actual cactuses. Like the plants. Okay. A Binance debit card, right. So you have a Binance debit card that basically just deducts from your Binance balance. Yeah. So, Fexer, when you pay with the Binance debit card, though, you're paying the dollar value, right? Or the euro value. Your euro, right? Yeah, so it's just like it just takes that crypto, sells it for the euro, and then pays the euro, right? So yeah, Fexer, in my opinion, you're still not using crypto. Does that make sense? You're still just selling crypto for the fiat and then paying with fiat. Does that make sense? Because you're paying with fiat. You're actually just, but you're you guys get what I'm saying? Yeah, I get it. And okay, so Seabiscuit actually did once buy plants. I don't know what Seabiscuit does for a living, but whether he bought it for a house plant, they for some reason, what was the token you used? Was it ETH? Was it Bitcoin? To buy the cacti. Litecoin. Very interesting. Okay, so again, yeah. Seabiscuit, thank you. Seabiscuit, was this the one and only time you used crypto to pay for something? Yeah, exactly. Does that make sense? Like, sometimes it happens, right? Like, I don't believe that zero of it is happening, but at the same time, Seabiscuit, let me ask you this. Were they pricing it in Litecoin, or were they pricing it in dollars? Yeah, I'm assuming it says dollars. DLS, yeah. Yeah, so if the cacti costed $10, I have no idea what the price of this cactus was. He still used $10 of Litecoin, right? He didn't use 10 Litecoin. What the fuck does Litecoin go for? Yeah, let me actually look. I can look up right here. Let's find good old Litecoin, probably top 20. Here we go, Litecoin. Litecoin is 64 cents, right? Sorry, $64. My apologies. So Litecoin right now is $64. There you go. You know what? Who knows? But the fact of the matter is, so Seabiscuit, you probably bought, like if it was $10 of cactus or whatever, you just used 1/6 of a Litecoin, right? Does everybody understand what he's saying? Yeah, so the point of it is, though, whoever he was buying cactus from, if it was a florist, if it was one of those gardening centers, they weren't pricing everything in Litecoin. Does that make sense? Do you guys get what I'm saying? Like, they're not really pricing it in Litecoin. So we're using Bitcoin and we're using Ethereum. And when you refer to a blockchain itself, you can think of it like, okay, this is the blockchain itself is like facilitating peer-to-peer transactions, but the instrument doesn't. Does that make sense? And this is also why I think that not a lot of analysis has been done on the crypto instrument. Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Right, because it's like, if you had this, do you guys understand something? In Venezuela, right? And other countries, okay, now let me just write in countries that experience hyperinflation. In countries that experience hyperinflation, they stop accepting the fiat. Do you guys understand? And why do they stop accepting the fiat? Like, literally, the barter system comes back. Yeah, they go back to barter. Yeah, or they use another country's currency, or they use fucking gold and shit like that. They start using something more stable. Does that make sense? Because they stop using the hyperinflated money, whether that's Argentina or Zimbabwe or Venezuela or arguably even in the United States, there was something called a continental, which was the first currency during the 1780s, and the continental got hyperinflated to shit, and people stopped accepting it. Does that make sense? Like people stop accepting it because like I don't want this. I don't want your note because this note represents debt. But if nobody's paying off the debt, it's just like a fucking tomb fork. Does that make sense? Nobody cares about it anymore. Do you guys get what I'm saying? Like, so the fact of the matter is, people stop accepting a hyperinflated note because they lose confidence in it because it's not storing value. So if crypto doesn't do the same thing, because crypto has the ability to pump, but also has the ability to crash. Does that make sense? So out of pain aversion, people don't really want to actually accept crypto at its numeraire value. They just say, you know what? Even though the dollar is inflated as fuck right now, I'll still accept the dollar instead because I can't predict, I can't forecast the crypto market. Yes, CJ. Yeah. Like a liquidity. Yeah, having liquidity for it means there's a market, which is also like safety. It's like a safe haven. Does that make sense? It's like, oh, there's always a, you know, CJ, when Terra Luna was collapsing in 2022, all of the centralized exchanges halted trading on the tokens. Does that make sense? Because they didn't want to accept it. Yeah, like they didn't want to fucking. They're like, okay, fuck. Yeah, like they're watching the price crash like 90%, 99% in like a single day, and it keeps crashing, and then like after day 2, they just halt trading. Yeah, because like they're like, okay, yeah, we also they're now holding a bunch of that token, those centralized exchanges. You know what I mean? I think a bunch of them turned trading back on eventually, but they had to reconfigure their order book or their fucking LP or however the fuck they're running their thing. And it's because they also no longer have confidence. So first the market panics, then they're still kind of collecting fees, and they're like, okay, actually we also cannot take any more of these because we can no longer accept it. So yeah, the liquidity being there is kind of what allows there to be some type of confidence. Yeah. And CJ, that's another example that this is another concept about like concentrated liquidity versus fragmented liquidity. You want there to be lots of LPs for a token because that shows the level of confidence in it. So when you go to like Uniswap, you'll notice that a lot of pairs are paired against Ethereum. Does that make sense to you guys? Right? If you go to PancakeSwap, lots of pairs against BNB. If you go to Trader Joe, or if they call it LFJ now, you'll see a lot of stuff paired against AVAX. Does that make sense to you guys? Right? On Spooky Swap or whatever, lots of stuff paired against Phantom. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? You have lots of stuff paired against the gas coin too. Yeah, but arguably we don't really have that many. We don't have that many external projects on PYRESWAP anyway. So like I wouldn't even use PYRESWAP as like this DEX example. But you do see Pyre Phantom paired against a bunch of different things. Does that make sense? So you see Pyre Phantom paired against Bitcoin, Ethereum, Phantom, and then Tuum, Threum, and Xeon. Make sense? And we're doing this right out the gate because the whole point is that having all these places, these different markets for Pyre Phantom increases the acceptability of it. Does that make sense? Like there's more places that accept Pyre Phantom. So when I see a project launch and they're just like doing a single LP, I'm like, you're not really building an economy for your financial instrument, which is kind of what your goal is. During hyperinflation events, like there's so much currency that people stop accepting it. And when people stop accepting it, it makes it crash worse. Does that make sense? So when Coinbase and Binance stopped accepting Terra Luna, right, Luna, it made it crash harder because now it's like even they won't accept it. And it's like, okay, now you have to panic even harder because people are like front running you on the way out the door. Does that make sense? So in order to create this confidence for a token, you want to be able to have like pools everywhere. There's lots of places where you can trade Ethereum. Does that make sense? Like it's got a lot of surface area. You're not trying to like keep it all in a single channel because that means that if something like happens to that channel, you're fucked. Like you're economically fucked. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? So my approach to LP is like, if it's centralized, you'd put it all in one pool. But you want it to be decentralized, you should put it in multiple pools. some people say, oh, but this causes higher price impact, and this causes arbitrage, right? But again, like the goal of the LP again is for the utilizer first and the speculator second. Does that make sense? Like if the utilizer's needs don't get served first, like the speculator's needs are impossible to serve. Yeah, unless you're running a fucking scam or a Ponzi scheme. So back in 2022, I used to tell these tomb fork devs they needed to spread their token out with more liquidity pairs, like more tokens. And they're like, they didn't want to do that. Like none of them wanted to do that. First of all, they were averse to arbitrage. Yeah, 100% Fexer, that's just like not in the cards. Like that's a serious project. Yeah. Yeah, that right there. Yeah, Fexer later on, yes. Later phases for sure, but not in phase 1. Yeah. Yeah, Fexer. 100% 2-ohm, 3-ohm, and Z-ohm will be cross-chain too. Yeah, all of our tokens will be on all of our chains. Does that make sense to you guys? Yeah, we will not have any problem there. Yep. Yeah, so yeah, we would have to either pay for relays or yeah, in the future we can do it, but yeah, it's not like an easy thing to fucking just spin up. Yeah. No, it's just not in phase 1, but yeah, later on, absolutely, Fexer. Yeah, 100%. Yep. Because by the way, do you guys remember this whole narrative? TOMB solves a liquidity problem on Phantom. Do you guys remember this quote? And this was a quote that was copied and pasted in like half of the tomb forks. Anyways, yeah, the point of it is, if you're going to use your fucking peg coin in the way it's described, if you want to solve a liquidity problem, you need to actually use it in liquidity. Does that make sense to you guys? Like, all over the place. Does that make sense to you guys? Like, if you're going to fucking, like, think about what this is, you need to use 2 ohm against Bitcoin. You need to use 2 ohm against Ethereum. You need to use 2 ohm against fucking, I don't know, Stargate, right? USDC. I know, yeah. Okay, well, I unfortunately can't ban this person right now, so I'll just let somebody else do it later. There you go. Perfect. Perfect, yeah, that'll work. Okay. All right. Yep. So, does that clear anything up? Yeah, like these elastic supply tokens, they should be spread the fuck out. Does that make sense? And also, the fact that it's spread out also is what causes the fact that certain amounts of transactions, so like you can get out of like a $20 buy, you can end up with like $100 of volume. Does that make sense to you guys? Don't worry about that. Okay, anyways, so if we're going to use these elastic supply tokens and say we're going to solve a liquidity problem, then clearly we should solve the liquidity problem, right? But again, nobody understands liquidity. So like it's just that I'm not really going to like my expectations are low for other people. Revolutionary optimism indeed. Revolutionary optimism indeed. Okay, so let's see. Let me see. There's another question. Hang on. Yeah, anyways, so when we talk about crypto or the early day narratives of there being a peer-to-peer payment system, there is a peer-to-peerness, but when I think of like a payment, I think of like this as being money due for goods or services rendered. Does that make sense to you guys? Like a payment? Do you guys know what I mean? Like, arguably, this is a word that can be, this is a word that can be kind of like, there isn't really a concrete definition here. If you go to PayPal, right? Everybody's heard of PayPal, right? So PayPal is a payment system as well, but then there's things like you have reputation, you can actually have like hold, you can like customize transactions. Does that make sense to you guys? Like PayPal does do this, right? It's a payment system, and you actually plug it into vendors, right? Like so it's like eBay uses PayPal. You can buy things with PayPal all over the place. Does that make sense? Like PayPal is accepted everywhere because why wouldn't it be, right? So when you think like PayPal is not peer-to-peer per se, but they're also they don't really use their own currency, right? They have their own stable coin, I think, but other than that, there is, okay, if you guys want to know what they are, and this is more Fivianism, and this is again, this is my opinion until I prove it as fact, what I would call them is decentralized de-individuated credit, and the word I keep thinking here is volume, but I might use the word system instead. But here, I'll just say it's volume right now. And this is what I think. This is what I think Bitcoin and Ethereum and like basically all kind of chains that have this structure. This is what I think they should actually be considered. And the reason I use this term is because decentralized means they're decentralized. Does that make sense? Some of them aren't decentralized, but you get what I'm saying, right? They don't have like a single actor that can kind of like yay or nay what's happening on that chain or what's happening as far as payments go. De-individuated, we're referring to credit itself. When we talk about the price of a token like Ethereum, right? If we talk about a price of token like Ethereum, you're looking at the credit score, like the dollar value of Ethereum itself is an example of like the system credit. Does that make sense? Because it's the amount of confidence that people place into it, which ends up with it being more valuable or less valuable. Does that make sense to you guys? So decentralized de-individuated credit volume. I call it a volume because it is in fact, it has more dimensions than a line, and it has more layers than a plane. And what I mean by that, I call it credit because it's activity in history. I could fucking break this term down later on. We're actually running out of time here in like 6 minutes. So we have a line, right? This is a line. And then you have like a plane. And then a volume looks like this, right? Do you guys understand this? Do you guys remember geometry from, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago for some of you, maybe 50 years ago for some others of you? Okay, a line is something that really only has one dimension. Does that make sense? It's one-dimensional, right? There's actually a point which is zero-dimensional. So there's like, there's a point as well, and a point is like this. A point technically has 0 dimensions. A line has 1 dimension, and the reason I use the word line, and you might have heard this before, CJ. Have you heard of a line of credit? You haven't? Okay. Has anybody ever heard the term line of credit before? Referring to it as a line. Okay, nobody? Okay, so in the United States, there's an instrument called a HELOC, which is a home equity line of credit. A line of credit basically consists of a certain credit limit. Does that make sense? It's like a limit. And let's say it's like $10,000, whatever, right? It has like a certain amount of time associated with it, right? Like you have this. Thank you over on Twitter for hearing of a line of credit before, right? So you have a limit, and it has this value amount, which is price, right? It has price, right? And then you have like it's a single person. Does that make sense? So when you have a line of credit, it's for a single entity. So it has an entity, which is one. Does that make sense? So you can have a line of credit that's given to a married couple. You can have a line of credit associated to an individual. You can have a line of credit associated to a business. Does that make sense? It's a single entity. Make sense? So you have price, you have entity, you have entities, and then of course quantity doesn't really matter, right? In fact, it's actually only, sorry, I got this wrong. This is actually quantity. So you have quantity, entity, and price, right? Q, P, and E. And this one right here, you only have entity of one. Does that make sense? And you also have a price. Damn, I should really I'm going to relabel this. Okay. So there's a quantity, and it's not and when I say price, this is also one. Meaning $1 is worth $1 in a line of credit. So if you have a credit card, and let's say the credit card has a $500 limit, they don't give a shit about the rate of inflation. Does that make sense? Like, that's all baked into their risk assessment. Do you guys understand? Do you guys understand? I don't think I've ever done this before for you guys. Okay, but yeah, if you guys want to know what these fucking if you guys want to know what actually the crypto market consists of, you have a quantity which is 10 grand. So if you have a $500 or 500 euro or 500 pound credit card, it doesn't care about like whether or not it's hyperinflating right now. It's just like, okay, you have 500 quantity of that instrument, right? The entity is one. So it's a business, it's an individual, or it's like a married couple. That's pretty much all that it is. Does that make sense? It can be a fucking nonprofit too, but you get what I'm saying. And the price is like the same. So a line here, single dimension. The only dimension that actually matters here is the quantity. Do you guys understand? Yeah, exactly. So if we we call it a vault when we talk about crypto, like blockchains, we talk about that gestalt, a cryptocurrency in a blockchain gestalt, as it were. We don't call it a plane of credit, we call it a volume of credit, because not only is this entity also greater than one, does that make sense? But you also have a price that is variable. Does that make sense? So the entity is variable, the quantity is variable, right? Variable. Does that make sense? So the total amount of people participating is variable, the price is variable, and then also the quantity is going to be variable too. So, in theory, this applies to any blockchain that doesn't have its this part of the theoretics is still very under construction. I should disclaim that. But generally speaking, if you've got Bitcoin, right, you've got a 21 million total supply. But the fact of the matter is, right now it's not 21 million. It's like what, 18 million? Right, 18 million today. You also have a price, right? So this is the quantity, right? This is the quantity. Then you have the entity, which is like, I don't know, millions or whatever. Yeah. Do you guys remember me saying how like the user base of Web3 seems to change nebulously between seasons? Right? So you have this variability with like the people that are engaging in it. Yeah, exactly. And then of course the price, variable. So it just goes up and it goes down. This is meant to be an exclamation point, but I guess now it looks something else like weird. Yeah. So the fact of the matter is, these things, the quantity is in fact increasing. So Bitcoin continues to get mined, right? The entity is millions of people. The entity continues to go up, right? And then the price in theory also tends to go up. So it's expanding in 3 dimensions. Do you guys understand? And this is why I call it a volume of credit. I don't think I've ever explained this before. Again, I haven't had a whiteboard to talk about this stuff before. I would normally only tell this to the troop, I think, but I guess I'll do it for fucking the PYRESWAP show. Does that make sense? So if you talk about a line of credit, you're talking about something that's one-dimensional, right? It's just like, hey, this is a quantity of dollars that you may or may not have access to, and we mean you and only you, and we mean, a dollar is worth a dollar no matter what. But a Bitcoin is worth all types of things. Every day it changes. There's a different amount. There's a different volume every day changing. There's a different fucking amount getting minted out of mining. And then, of course, you also have a different user base size every day. And the user base size, they're not a single entity. They are, in fact, variegated, and they have their own agendas. Does that make sense? So this is why when I talk about these things, let's go back to the fucking acronym. Decentralized, de-individuated, credit volume. So did I explain why there's a volume? Okay, why do we call it credit? Why do we not call it money? Like, why don't we not focus on fucking money? I'll tell you this. Did you guys know that in monetary history, credit systems predate money systems? Did you guys know that? Credit and debt systems they existed way before there was like gold coins or whatever the fuck they had, or they were using salt or seashells or whatever. Did you guys know that? There's some really amazing, they're interesting for me at least. There's some amazing and interesting studies of things like the Kula ring, because if you want to learn like what a proof of work system is, it is effectively assigning credit to people based on their activity, right? So credit is what? It's activity and it's history. Does that make sense? So when you're applying for a credit card with like a regular bank, the bank looks at you. Does that make sense? They analyze you. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Yeah. So what are they looking at though, CJ? They're looking at your activity and your history, right? If you have a long history, that's good because it's, they assume you're consistent. Does that make sense? Like most people are consistent, so they can look at somebody and they can make an assessment about how to forecast you, right? Like this is literally a corporation making this call about you, knowing nothing about you. They know like only about other loans you've had because they all get reported to the rating bureaus or whatever. But like, you guys understand what I'm saying here. Oh wow, we kind of went over now, but it's okay. I'm actually really glad we talked about this. So we have activity in the history, and this is why, by the way, Bitcoin keeps going up as it gets older, because it's building more and more history. Does that make sense to you guys? And as it's building history, it invites more activity. More activity, then, does that make sense? You have a positive feedback loop of de-individuated credit. I don't use the word social credit or communal credit because it's not really social. The actors in Bitcoin are not really like coordinated. They're not teammates. They don't really like each other. It's de-individuated, meaning it's just not individuals. You're scoring the credit based on the gestalt of the whole group. They just don't happen to necessarily be teammates or coworkers or allies. Make sense? So DDCV. This is my acronym for what these things actually are economically. I have like some actual paper. I have some documentation written about this, but I'm not going to release it until I have a much larger following. Let's put it that way. And volume, it's got 3 dimensions. Does that make sense? It's got more dimensions. And if you hear me say before, why don't we call it a line of credit? We don't call it a line because it has more dimensions than a line, and we don't call it a plane because it has more layers than a plane. Does that make sense to you guys? Right? Every entity can be another layer of price and quantity. And the words P and Q, by the way, why am I using those two variables on the supply and demand diagram? On the supply and demand diagram, this is price, this is quantity. Does that make sense? Right? So imagine if you had price and quantity, and then you would also think about instances. Does that make sense? Multiple instances of price and quantity. Does that make sense? But these instances are in fact actors, human actors. The instance is a word that comes from programming, but I guess it applies here. Okay. Any other questions from anybody? I'm done. Yeah, we're done today. You know what? I had other stuff planned to talk about, but I guess this tangent, I don't really hate tangents on the PYRESWAP show. Thank you guys so much for coming to the PYRESWAP show. And you know what? Arguably, this was very useful. I think me talking about this stuff was very useful. So I'll see you guys on Monday. Oh, by the way, we have a AMA tomorrow with Dow King. I'll be making an announcement about it tomorrow, I guess. And have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.